Life takes odd turns, but even tattered and worn yarn still has value. Tired joints and health flares don't have to stop the journey. Welcome to Hawksong Weaving, where all our paths are a little bit warped. I got the yarn for this scarf from a charity shop. Most of it still had the tags on, so I know that this is a wool-acrylic blend. I'm taking my time emballing some. I didn't with others, so that's absolutely going to bite me later. Here I'm setting up my physically adaptive warping situation. I've got the peg that came with the loom, attaching it to the side of my desk, getting things all set up. This is a way that absolutely works for me, but if this doesn't work for you, take what works, leave what doesn't. This works for me both because warping boards are expensive, but also I've got those lovely hypermobile shoulders, and I need gravity to do a lot of the work for me in this. That yellow ceramic mixing bowl is an absolute sleeper agent in this whole endeavor. I love that thing so much. It's got the heaviness that I need to keep any kind of yarn in place, and it's just such a lovely color. It reminds me of sunshine. This process is called warping or dressing the loom. I use a rigid Heddle loom for most of my weaving. This is a Cricut loom. I love it. It's small enough for my mini studio, but sturdy enough that it can get thrown around a bit. At this point, you'll notice that I've encountered a tied together bit of the yarn ball. That's what I get for not balling all the yarn myself. It's a good opportunity to spot those tie points so that it doesn't interrupt a warping flow. But knots and interruptions happen, so we pull to Scotty and fix up the warp drive. I'm finishing up the warping. I'll tie off the last little bit of yarn, just a simple knot. Then I'll remove the warp threads from my warping accordion warping board without cutting it at this point. Again, this is what works for me. This doesn't work for other weavers, but that's okay. There's a lot of terminology for weaving that has a long storied history, but for my videos, I'll be using basic terms. I know I have brain fog a lot, and I know others do too, so there's no need to get too complicated with it. My warping process involves me grabbing the whole hank of warp threads, tossing it over my shoulder, and then I use a small towel to prevent the warp threads from sausage rolling, or getting tight on the ends and loose in the middle, as another way of putting it. I've seen other weavers use wooden slats for this, or cardstock, but this is what works for me. And if this works for you, awesome! Take what works and leave the rest. I'll be using the side handles on the loom to turn the back warping beam and wrap the warping threads onto it. Again, there's a lot of other terminology for this, but that's what's simplest for right now, and so that's what we're going to do. Now that the warping thread is wrapped, I'm pulling this around, and what works for me is taking my warping hook and cutting the end of the looped warp thread and then seeing how the thread is laid out on the upper back beam and pulling the right hand side warp thread through the small hole in the rigid heddle. I did get a hug from my girlfriend right here, and I love her so freaking much. She is one of the absolute lights of my life. But I was absolutely a little bit frazzled after that, and I did lose my rhythm. So even though that this is, sped up, you can see where I've lost my rhythm a little bit and have to figure out, okay, which one is going in which hole. When you're first learning how to warp a loom or dress a loom, rather, I really recommend using different colors of yarn, different colors of fibers, because this was a little bit difficult. I'm not going to lie. I'm not too worried about how many warp threads are going into these half hitches. Not too many, not too few. It depends on the thickness of the warp threads, is what I've found. Because I'm planning a pretty dense weave with wool, I'm not worried about gapping at the ends of this weaving. I'll be adding another cloth to the bottom warping board. Again, this just helps make sure that the weaving itself doesn't sort of turn into a sausage roll, tight at the ends, loose in the middle. It just keeps everything neat and tidy. When that's on, I'll tidy up the fringe just a little bit, not too much. Like, I know approximately how long I want the fringe to be, but all the scraps will get used and nothing will go to waste, and then I'll tighten the warp threads themselves. I'm doing one of my favorite pickup stick patterns with this scarf. I move the rigid heddle down to the neutral position, and then behind the heddle I do up, down, up, down, up, down, all the way across, making sure to leave several warp threads for the selvage, or the side of the scarf. With my shuttle being wrapped, I'm starting weaving. This is a very simple weaving pattern, and it works up very quickly, I found. I start with the heddle up, pass the shuttle through, and then the heddle down in the neutral position, shuttle back through the other way, then the heddle up with the pickup stick pulled toward me to raise some of the warp threads to allow for a reversible, geometric pattern in the cloth. As you can see, there was a bit of a time skip. I often listen to podcasts while weaving or watch YouTube and Dropout TV. Weaving this length of a scarf usually takes me about 2 hours of solid weaving time, but that's with a lot of practice. There's no racing in weaving. Take your time and enjoy yourself as much as you can. I'd like to say thank you for sticking with me this long. I genuinely appreciate it, and I hope that you're getting something out of this too. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd, again, genuinely appreciate it, but there's no pressure. Know that my content's not going to be for everyone. I've just about reached the end of this yarn, and I'm pretty close to where I would be needing to stop to leave enough fringe, so I'm going to stop here. I'm going to shift my loom around once I'm done. This is one of the benefits of a smaller rigid heddle loom like a schnacked cricket. It's light enough to be moved around like this without tiring me out, but it's also sturdy enough that I can toss it about if I need to. I'm going to cut each warp thread and tie them first in groups of twos and then do a final sliding knot. I wasn't counting my warp threads, so it's a little uneven, so there'll be 2 fringe tassels of 3 threads instead, but I'll slide knot those twice to make up for the difference. Now I'm all done with this end, and time to slide the loom around again and figure out filming angles. I'm not used to having to worry about those. And tying off the other end. In another type of weaving with a different fiber type, this might have some gapping, but again, because it's wool and I'm going to be blocking it, I'm not too concerned. And next comes blocking. Because this is a wool blend, I'm using hot steam, and a lot of it, to sort of shrink the fibers in each strand and allow them to catch onto each other. This makes the woven product, a lot denser and just more warm, and it's just a lovely feeling to it. And of course I have to stand up because hypermobile shoulders, gotta have gravity do most of the work. Ah, collagen disorders, they're a lovely thing. That was sarcasm. This is honestly one of my least favorite parts of making scarves, is dealing with the fringe. I prefer to tie off each end, and there are a lot of them. So I make sure that both ends are completely lined up, and then I take my honestly too expensive pair of really good shears. Don't ask me how much these cost. My girlfriend's cat, of course, absolutely needs to investigate. Belle, honey, go away. I don't want to accidentally poke you with the very sharp, expensive shears. Just stop. This video is coming to a close. The scarf will be shown at the end. Thank you for stopping by. I'm so glad for the odd turn you took to get here. Remember, even tattered and worn yarn has value. Tired joints and health flares don't have to stop the journey. Thank you for spending time with Hawksong Weaving, where all our paths are a little bit warped. And I hope to see you next time. Enjoy.